and welcome, folks. This is Sunny, your host for a brand new podcast called the Florida Only Podcast. You got it. Capital Y, capital A, capital P, yet another podcast. But I think you'll find this podcast to be a little bit different, at least I hope you do. I'm currently recording from a studio set very close to the geographical center of Florida, which is generally considered to be near the city of Brooksville, Florida. So the idea here is I'm figuratively and literally discussing Florida-related stories of interest, while also at the same time figuratively and literally also in the middle of it all. Those Florida stories of interest could be stories that originate in Florida or discuss Florida in a way that would be of interest to local Floridians or a nationwide audience or even an international audience. I'm launching episode 0 right now, today, which is what you're currently watching. It's June 9th, 2023. There are so many newsworthy events going on that always grab widespread headlines. These stories could be political in nature, involve the dynamic tourism industry such as Disney World or Universal Studios, or involve massive weather events like those notorious and deadly Florida hurricanes. Stories could also include those weird Florida crime stories that you're always hearing about, stories that are cultural in nature, stories that are a mix of any of the above, and so much more. Just to prove my point, these are the top stories since 2010 that serve as examples alone. In 2011, we had the Casey Anthony trial. The trial and subsequent acquittal of Casey Anthony, who was accused of murdering her 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee, received extensive media coverage and sparked debate about the justice system. In 2012, the Trayvon Martin case, the shooting of Trayvon Martin by George Zimmerman in Sanford, Florida, sparked international outcry and fueled a national conversation on racial profiling and justice in the United States. In 2016, we had the Pulse nightclub shooting. The tragic mass shooting at the Pulse gay nightclub in Orlando was one of the deadliest in U.S. history, generating headlines worldwide and prompting discussions about LGBTQ+ rights, terrorism, and gun control. In 2017, we had Hurricane Irma. This Category 5 hurricane caused significant damage in the Florida Keys and other parts of the state, becoming one of the costliest hurricanes in Florida history. In 2018, we had the Parkland school shooting in the southeast of Florida. The shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, led to international headlines and gave rise to the March for Our Lives movement, advocating for gun control. In 2018, again, we had Hurricane Michael. This Category 5 hurricane devastated parts of the Florida Panhandle, causing widespread destruction and the loss of life. And I remember this one in particular personally because I also had to evacuate during this time. So that was amazing to go through that experience. In 2019, Florida was impacted by the death and investigation of Jeffrey Epstein. The arrest and subsequent death of this financier and convicted sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein, he had a residence in Palm Beach, Florida. And so the story is about international controversy and, of course, and conspiracy theories that are still going on today. During the pandemic in 2020 and 2021, we had Miami's rise as a tech hub. Miami's emerging status as a tech hub with multiple high-profile tech and finance companies and entrepreneurs moving to the city of Miami during the COVID-19 pandemic. This made national and international headlines. Florida is also known for its, of course, science progress. In 2020, we had the launch of SpaceX Crew Dragon. The Crew Dragon Demo 2 mission marked the first crewed launch from U.S. soil since 2011 and served as a significant step in commercial space travel. This launch took place on the eastern part of Florida at the Kennedy Space Center, and it garnered national and international attention. In 2021, we also had the infamous and sad Miami building collapse. The tragic collapse of a condominium building in Surfside, Miami, caused international shock and concern over building safety. Later in 2021, we had the Gabby Petito and Brian Landry case. Gabby Petito's disappearance and subsequent homicide during a cross-country trip with her fiancé, Brian Landry, garnered international attention. The investigation involved multiple agencies and attracted widespread media coverage due to the circumstances of the case and the extensive use of social media by the couple during their trip. Landry returned to his home in Northport, Florida, which is currently about a couple hours southwest of me. And he came back without Petito, and he later disappeared himself, only to be discovered later when he committed suicide. So this whole story added to the intrigue and public interest in this case and garnered international domestic headlines. In March 2022, we had the Disney and Ron DeSantis feud beginning. DeSantis signed the Parental Rights and Education Bill into law in March 2022. Shortly thereafter, Disney issued a statement saying the bill should never have been passed and should never have been signed into law. And of course, here it is, June 2023, and the two sides are still tied up in court with lawsuits and counter lawsuits still happening. And of course, in April 2023, we had House Bill or HB 543 become law. This bill, strengthening the Second Amendment, eliminated the requirement that a Florida individual had to obtain a permit to carry a concealed firearm in Florida. Beginning in July 2023, which is coming up, permitless concealed carry for lawfully owned weapons will become legal. So no more permits. In May of 2023, the NAACP issued a travel advisor to Florida, which is a formal travel advisor in response to what they perceived as Governor Ron DeSantis conducting an aggressive attempt to erase Black history and to restrict diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in Florida schools. And very most recently, June 9th, 2023, actually the past 24 hours, a Florida federal grand jury indicted a Florida resident and former U.S. President Donald Trump on federal charges for storing dozens of classified documents at his Florida residence and for refusing to return them to the FBI and the National Archives. So he's facing 7 counts, including willful retention of information related to national defense, at least 1 false statement charge, and at least 1 charge relating to the obstruction. And according to a source with knowledge of the charges, the charging documents from a federal grand jury in Miami have not yet been made public, so more to come on that. And again, these are only some of the sensational headline grabbers since 2010 that are happening in and around Florida. But our journey doesn't stop with the headline grabbers. We're also going to shine a light on the lesser-known stories, too, whether they just appeal to us local residents or beyond. So our upcoming first episode is set to premiere, I'd say, within a week or so, with each episode featuring between 1 to 4 segments, give or take. And the aim is to compile a podcast episode consisting of these 1 to 4 segments for a grand total of about 30 minutes, so for quick and easy watching and or listening. Each podcast segment will be released as they are made and available on Twitter and YouTube immediately as a video podcast segment. Once we filled a podcast episode with 1 to 4 segments, then we'll release the compiled, finished version of that video podcast on both Twitter and YouTube platforms. Also, we'll be releasing audio-only versions of the completed podcast, which means no individual segment releases, on the following platforms, just in case you listen to these other platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Alexa, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Castro, Castbox, and Podchaser. We'll initially aim to be on a weekly publishing schedule, give or take a day or two, and the podcast will be stationary in the beginning. And in the near term, I hope to record podcasts in other parts of Florida over time, including doing the occasional vlog-style episode and maybe throwing some interviews in there. Why should you follow this podcasting journey, you ask? Because we are more than just a podcast. We aim to build a vibrant community of individuals fascinated by Florida's told and untold stories, not just with other local Florida residents, but with those people who visit Florida or just have a keen interest in this big state of ours. As your host, I'll do my best to present diverse viewpoints on each topic where it's applicable, and hopefully shaping an informed perspective for you so you can make your own decisions and conclusions about what a story means. So I've lived in Florida since 2010, and I know from a personal firsthand experience that Florida is very diverse and can be very different. Just take a look at the geographic regions here. You've got Tallahassee, the state capital, which is located in the northern part of the state, in the Florida Panhandle area. And it's become a strong influence from Southern U.S. culture. It's known for its concentration of colleges and universities, including Florida State University, Florida A&M University. And this creates a vibrant, youthful atmosphere. Its inland location, the northern part of the state, also means it gives it a different climate with cooler winters than much of the rest of the state of Florida. Tampa and Orlando, both situated in central Florida along the I-4 corridor. For example, Orlando is internationally known for its large concentration of theme parks, including Walt Disney World and Universal Studios, which, of course, drive a major part of the tourism industry. It also serves as a diverse economy with significant sectors in high-tech, aviation, and aerospace. Then if you go further south, about 3 hours, you have Miami on the southeast coast, which has a significant Latino influence and presence, particularly from Cuba and other parts of the Caribbean. It's known for its vibrant nightlife, beaches, art scene, including the annual Art Basel Miami Beach. And it's also a major center for international trade and finance. Then you have Key West, part of the Florida Keys. Key West provides a contrast with its relaxed Caribbean atmosphere, historic sites, and representation of the Florida's LGBTQ plus community. So while these cities and more are all a part of Florida and share some statewide characteristics, each offer their own unique vibe and culture. And consider this. Every year, Florida attracts over 130 million visitors. That's more than the entire population of Japan. So far in 2023, Florida's tourism is booming, as new numbers show that between January and March 2023, Florida saw a record 37.9 million visitors, the largest volume of visitors ever recorded in a single quarter. Overall, Florida is in the top 2 or 3 states visited by domestic and international visitors per year. It's no surprise, then, that Florida is a hub of culture, fun, and stories, and it's comparable in landmass size to countries like England, Romania, and Greece. In terms of Florida's 22 million resident population, that's similar to countries like Sri Lanka, Burkina Faso, Taiwan, Romania, and Chile. So Florida is big, and it's a hub of international visitors and residents, and that's why so many interesting stories emanate from here, and that's why we're going to start tracking those stories for you. Of course, for each video, engage with me and other viewers in the comments section for this video on YouTube and Twitter. And if you made it this far, why not like this video and be a subscriber? I think I have something like minus 50, minus 100 subscribers, something like that. So I need your help and engagement to grow this channel. I have no doubt that together we can grow a passionate community, fascinated by the myriad narratives that spring from our extraordinary state. Are you on board? Let's embark on this incredible journey together through the small and big stories coming out of Florida. By the way, do you see that bookshelf over my right shoulder? Well, that's real, and I'm compiling good old-fashioned printed books related to Florida. Leave me a recommendation in the comments section as to what should be on my bookshelf. I'm open to any and all topics. Until we meet again, this is the Florida Only Podcast signing off for now until we get to episode 1. Thank you, everyone, and take care, and I'll see you in the next video.
For more awesome content, like and subscribe now.